Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing 22nd of August, outlining some of the key themes and aspects for the week and giving a basic overview of what it all means for us. Before I do that though, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It merely gives us a framework to help us understand what the energies around us are doing, what kind of themes and lessons are unfolding around us, and it then gives us a context to understand what's going on or why people may be behaving certain ways, so we can then respond to situations rather than reacting to them because we have a wider context in mind. Now, in terms of the astrology for the week, there's quite a bit of change taking place this week, but there's also elements of the astrology which bring about certain grounding and stabilisation after the rapid changes we've experienced since the eclipse season. So I'll start off with as the moon as usual. So the moon is initially in Capricorn, and this is a time for focusing on applying ideas and insights and trying to manifest the ideas we've been exploring. And it's also about taking personal responsibility for our lives, so taking responsibility for what's going on in our lives and how we contribute to how things unfold in our lives. Then on Thursday the moon will move into Aquarius, so this will be a time where I may feel that need to kind of take a step back to kind of reflect on how well any projects we've been pursuing have materialised, but it's also to do with trying to get a perspective of what is our relationship like, or what is our role within our given communities, and how well do we play that role, and how can we better help out within the community. Before on Sunday the moon will move into Pisces, and this brings a strong theme of connecting with that state of oneness, of meditating and feeling the natural ebbs and flows of life. And it's about connecting with that spirit within and strengthening it if we've lost contact with it for whatever reason. Before on Tuesday the moon moves into Aries and brings with it that feeling of needing to take action, to initiate things, or to just get things done rather than sitting around all the time. Now, in terms of astrology, for everything else going on, we have the key change will be the sun moving out of Virgo. So we've had a month of the sun in his home sign of Leo, and it's been highlighting issues around things like our ability to give and receive love. Do we have a fear of rejection? Do we fear being true to who we are? And what's our relationship like with creativity? And it's about building on these areas and tapping into that creative ability or creative spark and nurturing it into a flame. But now with the sun moving into Virgo, this is the next step along. So Leo's kind of like creativity without boundaries, if you like. It's wanting to do everything and ready to play. Virgo reminds us that we only have a limited amount of time in life, so it's about prioritising what the best course of action is. Virgo also deals with becoming more grounded, but it's about health in some respects. It's also about the power of our habits. So with Virgo, it's a big part of it is that self-assessment, that self-examination, and it's about looking at the different skills that we have or different abilities we have and evaluating them very carefully to see where do things need to be refined and improved, and where's things going okay as they are. But a major thing that we need to be mindful of with the sun's transit through Virgo is becoming aware of the inner critic. It's that part of us driven by the ego that's seeking egoic perfection, which is impossible in itself because the ego is inherently imperfect because it's an illusion. But one of the things that we need to be mindful of, be asking ourselves is, where do we suffer, or where do we cause ourselves to suffer through a relentless pursuit of perfectionism? Where do we have a tendency to be critical of ourselves when we find perceived flaws and imperfections? And where do we then end up criticising and judging other people as a way of trying to avoid that inner critic. So rather than dealing with our own selves, dealing with our own issues, we end up projecting judgment and condemnation onto other people. But this obviously doesn't have to be this way at all. When Virgo's at its highest, there's a beautiful humility to it, and the capacity to render service to others. I don't mean by service, I'm not talking about being submissive or subordinate, but service in its highest form is a practical expression of love. But for us to be doing this or to achieve this in the first place, we need to temper that critical side of Virgo through embracing unconditional self-acceptance, i.e. when we do find a part of ourselves that for whatever reason we struggle to accept or we don't particularly like, rather than instinctively rejecting it or trying to condemn it or suppress it, it's learn to just accept it as it is, and it's through that acceptance that we're then better able to make the necessary changes to improve that perceived imperfection. I mean, the thing is, perfection as it is, it's a nebulous concept. Everyone defines it differently, so, and none of us will ever be perfect whilst we're in the human condition. So perfectionism in that respect can actually be quite damaging. But Virgo is about that self-mastery. It's taking responsibility for ourselves, and Virgo also deals with health, so we're talking like physical and mental health here rather than spiritual. And this is about looking at assessing the habits and routines that we pursue. Are they conducive to strong health, or do they undermine it? And it's also our mental health is directly tied to that inner critic. Is where do we allow that inner critic to run riot and destroy our self-esteem? And where do we need to learn to tame it and accept our own human imperfections, embrace them? Because it's only by embracing our imperfections that we can really be real, and it's through being real that people see who we are, and we can be truly humble and loving and provide loving service to others through identifying the skills that we have and then turning them into, or convert them into, some kind of service which isn't there to be subservient or subordinate. It's converting compassion into action. So it's not just having feelings of compassion or desire to help people. It's identifying practical means that are going to be truly beneficial, but ideally avoid codependency in the process. I'll do a whole other video on the Sun in Virgo because go on and on here, and there's plenty more to discuss yet. So on Saturday itself, we're going to have an exact grand trine between Uranus in Taurus, Uranus retrograde in Taurus rather, Sun in Virgo, and Saturn retrograde in Capricorn. So this is a grand Earth trine, so it's about the material basis of life, and it's about developing that stable base that enables us to pursue greater goals in the long run. So we have Uranus retrograde in Taurus is bringing the theme of revolutionising our understanding of our own values, our own resources, and understanding that we have a lot of untapped resources within us, and it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to explore within ourselves, to try out new skills or practice new ways of approaching our resources and finding more utilitarian ways to do things. So rather, it's learning how to achieve more with less, was also approaching it from a humanitarian perspective, so it's seeing how can we share the resources that we have and improve the way we utilise them so it benefits to the maximum number of people as possible. Then we have this trine to the Sun here, so this trine brings the opportunity to transform our sense of self through that transformation of self-worth, and it's seeing how can we what resources can we channel into acts of service, what resources can we develop that will then benefit other people. And then we also have Saturn retrograde in Capricorn, bringing that need to develop that personal integrity. So it's a case of what you see is what you get. So we're true to who we are, and it's channeling that, or focusing on that need for patience, self-discipline, self-control, and resilience in the face of adversity to enable us to become the strongest versions of ourselves possible. And the more grounded and practical we are, and the more we empower ourselves through, or being true, by being true to who we are, the more able we are to be of service to others. Because Sun in Virgo also brings around themes of physical and mental healing, but it requires that we deal with those issues around the inner critic first of all. Whilst this Grand Trine is in effect, we're also going to have the full moon in Pisces. This particular full moon has a lot of aspects to it, so I'll go into more detail in that regard in a separate video. But what this full moon in Pisces is about is balancing the Virgo-Pisces polarity. The two together are like the axis of initiation and the axis of healing. So whereas Virgo is more like the descent of spirit into matter, Pisces is more like the liberation of spirit from matter. But they both deal with health. Virgo deals with the physical and mental health, whilst Pisces deals with spiritual health. So the two together are about that mind-body-spirit union that is necessary for true optimum health to be achieved. So it's what do we need to do to nourish our spirits, what do we need to do to nourish and calm our minds, and what do we need to be doing to nurture our bodies. So it's also looking at, because with the Sun in Virgo, it is about that self-reflection and that honest self-analysis where we acknowledge where we have infections and we work on them, but we need to be very mindful that we don't become super critical. So the moon in Pisces in some respects is like the counterbalance. It reminds us to stay in touch with our own emotions, to maintain empathy and compassion first and foremost to ourselves, but then when we've got that wellspring within us, sharing that emotion, that empathy and compassion towards others, and through that Piscean connection, to that feeling of oneness, it enables us to more clearly tame the inner critic through channeling universal love through ourselves. It's about becoming a vessel for that divine will, if you like. It's that vessel for universal consciousness and universal love. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we take direct action in someone else's life. It could just be that by being the best and most honest and humble and compassionate versions of ourselves as possible, the people in our immediate presence will naturally benefit from that just by being in our energy. But the more we focus that balance of body, mind and spirit within ourselves and seek to achieve that balance, the better able we are to help other people in the long run, as long as of course we're not doing things in a way that's going to stop that person from learning, as long as we make sure that whatever way we try to help someone is truly empowering. So with Virgo there can be that fear of making mistakes, and it can also lead to that need to try and compulsively help other people so that they don't make the same mistakes we may have made. But sometimes we got to allow each other to make those errors, because it's often through making mistakes or things going a bit wrong that we best learn lessons in the given circumstance. So it's through that process of trial and error, through that consistent refinement, that we better hone our skills. And through honing our own skills as individuals, we become more effective at helping other people. But it's also important that we try and encourage other people to help themselves rather than just doing the legwork for them. So the last thing I want to mention is that Mars is going to be turning direct on Monday. So this will also mark the end of the 2 months retrograde that we've had, and we could find that we find taking action and asserting ourselves suddenly becomes a lot easier again. But it's important that we don't we don't just dismiss what we've experienced over the past few weeks. It's important that whatever insights we've gained are not wasted, that we apply them, and that we make sure that whatever we've learned about our ability to assert ourselves and the way, and making sure that the actions and desires we're pursuing are actually true to who we are, we need to then make sure that we maintain the new trajectory that we've had to undergo as a result of the insights we've learned, and that we don't just fall back into old habits. So the more we apply the lessons that we've learned over the past about 8 weeks or more, the better able or more empowered we'll be to take action in the long run that is more aligned with who we are and is driven or guided by our higher self rather than just driven by egoic impulses. So quite a lot to go through, but I hope it's a useful guide for the week. But the main thing if there's one thing to take away, is that this is a week for connecting or observing that inner critic, and it's a week for kind of identifying where we struggle to accept ourselves, where do we tend to criticise ourselves relentlessly, and where does this lead to criticism and judgment of others. Because if we're criticising and judging other people, ultimately it's because that person's reflecting something to us that we don't like about ourselves, and we almost project this ideal onto other people and expect them to fulfill something, or hope that they'll achieve some, or hope that person will try and achieve that, even despite the fact that we know that we're not really doing it ourselves. So the main thing we need to develop is that humility to when we interact with people, is to meet that person where they are rather than expect them to be a certain way. It's about overcoming judgment and embracing humility, and it's tapping into that unconditional love and compassion and giving it to ourselves first to tame that inner critic so that it isn't destroying our sense of self-worth and causing us to criticise and judge others. And from there, it's help other people in whatever ways is best suited for the situation at hand, whilst making sure that we're not undermining that person's growth, we're not usurping that person's free will in any way, and that whatever service we're given is given with love, but also maintaining the necessary boundaries so that we don't undermine our own health. And it's making sure that we focus on, over the coming months, developing that internal union of body, mind and spirit, where the three work together, there's no internal clashes or internal conflict, and through being humble and honest with ourselves and learn to love ourselves unconditionally and embrace any flaws or imperfections that we perceive within ourselves, we then can achieve humility which nurtures and helps other people and can soothe other people. But it's only through overcoming our own inner judgments first and embracing unconditional love and compassion for ourselves that we're able to give this to other people. So we need to work on ourselves first before we expect someone else to do it, because if we're not prepared to change, what right do we have to expect anyone else? But with that grand trine dominating most of the week, this is a good week for getting grounded and becoming or getting more or stabilising things after the often seeming madness and intensity of the eclipse season. This grand trine gives us the opportunity to become grounded again, to take stock of the situation we're in, and to more readily embrace things like self-discipline and whatever insights we gain about our sense of worth. So I hope that's a useful guide for the week. Take care, and may the week bring you many blessings.